guilt is a quiet shadow that lingers long after the act is done. It doesn't arrive suddenly, it creeps in slowly, like fog settling over your thoughts. You try to ignore it, to drown it with distractions, laughter, or excuses, but it stays. It hides in the smallest pauses, in the silence between words, in the moments you think you've moved on. It doesn't need an audience. Guilt lives in private spaces where your heart whispers the truth your mind tries to forget. You can build walls, convince yourself that what happened wasn't your fault, but guilt knows how to wait. It's patient, calm, and relentless. It follows you into your sleep, shaping your dreams into scenes of regret. It turns the sound of someone's name into a reminder of what was lost. Sometimes, it's not even about what you did, it's about what you didn't do, what you said too late, or never said at all. It can grow from neglect as easily as from action. Guilt isn't loud or dramatic, it's quiet but heavy, pressing down on your chest until you can barely breathe. And yet, it's proof that you still care, that something inside you refuses to go numb. The weight of guilt is painful, but within that pain lies the chance for change. If you listen closely, it doesn't just accuse, it teaches. It asks you to look deeper, to understand the choices that brought you here. It asks for honesty, not punishment. Because guilt, when faced, can become a path back to yourself. It can turn from a haunting echo into a guide toward redemption. The same feeling that breaks you can also rebuild you, if you let it. Guilt is not born in the act itself, it awakens in the moments after, when awareness begins to bloom. It comes alive in the silence that follows your choices, when you finally see the distance between what you did and what you meant to do. It doesn't strike like lightning, it seeps in slowly, weaving itself through every thought until it becomes part of your breathing. For some, guilt never comes at all, they move through life untouched, never questioning the weight of their actions. But for those who feel deeply, guilt is a mirror that refuses to lie. It shows you the version of yourself you tried to hide, the truth you buried under excuses and pride. It doesn't let you forget the tone of your voice when you hurt someone, the look in their eyes, or the silence that followed. It finds you in quiet rooms, in familiar places, in moments when you thought you were safe. It makes you relive memories until they lose their color, turning everything gray. Yet guilt is not just punishment, it's awareness. It's a reminder that your heart still knows the difference between right and wrong, that you are still human enough to care. The pain it brings is not meant to destroy you, but to awaken you. Every sting, every ache, every restless night is an invitation to change. You can let guilt cage you, or you can let it carve a new shape within you, a softer, wiser one. It cannot erase what's done, but it can guide what's next. When you finally stop running from it and start listening, guilt transforms from an enemy into a quiet teacher, whispering the truth you were too afraid to face until now. The emotional nature of guilt is unlike any other feeling known to the heart. It's not sudden like anger or fleeting like sadness, it lingers, quiet and persistent, like a slow-burning fire that refuses to die. It doesn't always announce itself, sometimes it hides in small things, in the way you hesitate before smiling, in the way your voice trembles when you speak of the past. Guilt carries its own kind of loneliness because it's something only you can truly feel. No one else can step into that space where your memories and regrets live together. It wraps around you in silence, making you question your worth, your goodness, your right to feel joy again. You start to measure your happiness against your mistakes, believing that too much light will expose the darkness still inside you. Every good thing begins to feel undeserved. But guilt, as painful as it is, reveals the depth of your humanity. It shows that your heart still feels, still remembers, still longs to be better. The emotional weight of guilt can break you down, but it can also build you into someone new. It can make you gentle, more aware, more capable of empathy. Those who have walked through guilt understand pain in others, they recognize it in their eyes, in their pauses, in their unspoken words. The ache of guilt teaches compassion that no lesson ever could. It reminds you that every emotion, even the darkest one, carries meaning. When you stop fighting it and instead let it speak, guilt becomes more than suffering, it becomes understanding. It teaches you to honor the past without living in it and to forgive yourself not because you forgot, but because you finally learned what it means to feel. There are nights when guilt feels almost alive, breathing beside you as you lie awake, staring at the ceiling. Every sound in the dark seems to carry a whisper of memory, footsteps, laughter, the echo of words you wish you could take back. You try to distract yourself with noise, with light, with the endless scroll of your phone, but guilt has a way of slipping through the cracks. It doesn't fade when you're busy, it simply waits for the silence to return. It lives in that still moment between thought and sleep, when the heart is unguarded. The mind begins to replay scenes, rewriting what could have been said, what could have been done differently. You start to see how one choice, one hesitation, one careless act rippled into something much larger. People often say that forgiveness is the cure, but they rarely mention how difficult it is to forgive yourself. It's easy to say sorry to someone else, but when it comes to your own reflection, the words die in your throat. The hardest thing isn't being forgiven, it's believing you deserve it. You can't erase the past, and you can't undo what's done. But you can learn to live differently, to honor the pain by becoming better because of it. Self-forgiveness is not about pretending it never happened, it's about accepting the truth without letting it define you. It's about looking at your scars and realizing they are proof of survival, not shame. When you finally reach that point, guilt begins to lose its power. It stops being a chain and becomes a reminder, a sign that you once fell, but also that you had the strength to rise again, more honest, more humble, and more human than before. Some people carry guilt like a badge of honor, as if the weight of their suffering could somehow balance the scales of what they've done. They believe that by constantly punishing themselves, they're proving their remorse, but guilt was never meant to be a permanent companion. It's supposed to be a teacher, not a prison guard. When you hold on to guilt for too long, it begins to shape the way you see yourself. You start to believe you are nothing more than your mistakes, that every good thing you touch will crumble because you don't deserve it. You become cautious with happiness, suspicious of peace, as if joy were something forbidden. But guilt loses its purpose when it turns into identity. Its role is to awaken awareness, not to define a life. There is a fine line between remembering and reliving, between learning and self-destruction. True growth comes when you decide to stop bowing to your past and start building something from it. You can't erase your wrongs, but you can rewrite their meaning through what you do next. Every act of kindness, every moment of honesty, every time you choose love over fear, that's how guilt transforms. It doesn't vanish, but it softens, turning from pain into wisdom. It reminds you of what matters, of the kind of person you promised yourself you'd become. The scars guilt leaves behind are not marks of shame, they are signs of survival, proof that you felt deeply enough to change. When you finally understand that, guilt becomes quiet. It doesn't demand punishment anymore, it simply reminds you that your heart is still alive, still capable of learning, and still worthy of peace. The emotions tied to guilt are layered and unpredictable, shifting from one feeling to another like waves that refuse to rest. At first, there's the shock, the realization of what you've done or what you failed to do. Then comes the ache that spreads slowly, filling every corner of your being. Sadness takes hold, heavy and quiet, followed by anger at yourself for being careless, for not stopping, for not being stronger. Fear enters next, whispering that you'll never be forgiven, that you'll carry this burden forever. And beneath it all lies longing, the desperate wish to go back, to change just one moment. Guilt is chaos wrapped in silence, it doesn't always show on your face, but it lives in your eyes, in your pauses, in the tone of your voice when you speak about the past. You can smile, laugh, and pretend everything's fine, yet inside, a storm keeps turning. The heart becomes a battlefield where forgiveness and shame collide again and again. But guilt, in all its complexity, also holds a strange kind of power. It reveals the depth of your conscience, the part of you that still believes in right and wrong. When faced with courage, guilt can transform. It teaches humility, compassion, and patience. It strips away arrogance and pride, forcing you to see others' pain through the lens of your own. The same feeling that once crushed you becomes the reason you never want to cause harm again. In that sense, guilt is both punishment and blessing, a reminder that you are capable of regret, and therefore, capable of change. When you stop running from it and start understanding it, guilt doesn't destroy you, it begins to heal you from within. There comes a time when guilt becomes so familiar that it starts to feel like a part of who you are. You stop fighting it and start accepting its presence, like a shadow that never leaves. At first, you think it's strength, to carry the burden, to bear the pain, but over time, it begins to hollow you out. You start mistaking constant suffering for redemption, believing that peace would mean forgetting, and forgetting would mean betrayal. But guilt was never meant to be a lifelong sentence. It's a lesson, not a home. When you live inside it too long, it begins to define the boundaries of your world. You stop reaching for joy because you think you don't deserve it. You stop trying to love because you fear you'll only ruin it again. You convince yourself that this is the price you must pay, that endless remorse equals moral purity. But it doesn't. True redemption is not found in self-punishment, it's found in transformation. Healing doesn't mean pretending it never happened, it means facing what did and choosing to rise anyway. You can't erase the past, but you can soften its echoes by how you live now. Every act of kindness, every honest word, every time you choose courage over shame, you rewrite your story. Guilt begins to lose its grip when you allow yourself to grow from it instead of being crushed by it. The past doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. It becomes a scar instead of a wound, a reminder instead of a cage. You don't have to carry guilt forever to prove you've learned. Sometimes, the truest proof of remorse is the peace you finally allow yourself to feel. To confront guilt is to confront the version of yourself that you've spent years avoiding. It's standing face to face with your own shadow, the part of you that made choices you now regret, that spoke words you wish could be unsaid, that hurt people you still think about in quiet moments. Most people run from this confrontation, building walls of distraction, busyness, or denial. They think if they move fast enough, the past won't catch them. But guilt has a patience that time cannot weaken. It waits in silence, appearing when life slows down, when the noise fades, when your guard finally drops. Facing it is terrifying because it demands honesty, and honesty strips away all your masks. You have to look at yourself without defense, without justification, and that level of truth is not easy to bear. Yet within that pain lies the beginning of freedom. Guilt isn't there to destroy you, it's there to show you where you went wrong, to bring light to the parts of yourself that need healing. When you stop resisting, when you stop pretending, guilt transforms. You begin to see it not as punishment but as a guide, a messenger sent to remind you of the person you still have the power to become. It teaches you empathy, it softens your pride, and it humbles your spirit. Guilt, when understood, doesn't chain you to your past, it invites you to grow beyond it. The moment you stop running and look it in the eye, guilt begins to lose its cruelty. It becomes the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming, a quiet, painful, but necessary path toward peace, truth, and self-forgiveness. Guilt doesn't truly fade with time, it fades with acceptance. You can wait years hoping it will dissolve on its own, but guilt doesn't obey time, it obeys truth. It ends only when you stop wishing for the past to change and start understanding why it unfolded the way it did. Acceptance doesn't mean approval, and it doesn't mean forgetting. It means making peace with what can't be undone and allowing yourself to breathe again. Every mistake, every failure, every tear-stained night becomes part of your story, shaping the person you are now. The pain you feel is proof that you cared, that your heart was alive enough to recognize the difference between right and wrong. You can't erase the past, but you can choose what it teaches you. Instead of letting guilt consume you, let it remind you how deeply you can feel, how much you can grow. The journey to forgiveness begins the moment you stop fighting yourself. You forgive not because you've excused the past, but because you refuse to let it control your future. You start to see that guilt's purpose was never to destroy, it was to awaken. Once its lesson is learned, the pain softens, turning into wisdom that guides your choices. You begin to live with more gentleness, more compassion, more truth. The person you once were no longer feels like a stranger, they become part of your growth. And that's where peace begins, not in forgetting, but in understanding. When you finally accept that you cannot rewrite your story but can still shape how it ends, guilt transforms into something softer. It becomes a quiet reminder that you have faced your darkness and found the courage to step back into the light, whole and human once again.